Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Born Podcast, brought to you from our studio here in central Pennsylvania. I'm your host, sort of, today, Nathan Imboden, and on the podcast, we have the privilege of being able to share and champion the message of entrepreneurship and business ownership by interviewing different business owners and leaders right here in our backyard in central Pennsylvania. You can find a full replay of these broadcasts on our website at questmont.com/bornpodcast. We're also on every social media channel you like, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or wherever you follow podcasts, whether it's Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Play. Search for The Born Podcast on any of those channels. Hit that like and subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all these episodes. Now, I said sort of earlier because today's going to be a little bit different. To my left is a blast from the past, Mr. George Book. George W. Book.
That's right.
President and CEO of the West Shore Chamber of Commerce. And we're going to flip the script a little bit today. Thought it would be fun for me and hopefully for all of you to do an interview of myself, to give a little, maybe a chance to share a little bit of my story, what brought me here, what led me to wanting to do the podcast, why I want to continue to do the podcast. And I thought there was only one person for the job, and Joy would agree, our producer would agree, that one person is George.
It's a lot of pressure.
It is.
But
I've set a bar. Baby.
You've set a bar pretty high, but luckily I'm tall enough. I think I can get over the bar. I think we should be in good shape.
That's true.
So, Nathan, thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this. It was great when we were doing underground recordings during an artist formerly known as COVID. We were recording from a secret bunker for what was a previous podcast that we did together for a number of years.
Yep.
It's great to be back and be a part of this again. So let's start at the beginning, which is always fun, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, where you're at now is not where you started.
Yeah.
So give us a little bit of background on sort of how did you get to this point, right? Because this has been a journey. You and I have been friends for a long time, talked about this. Where did you start? What happened? Sort of how did you get to where we're at now at Questmont?
Yeah. Well, it all started on a cold evening on October of 1984.
Takes me back.
It does, yes. You can feel the rain coming down from the sky. Now, I'll fast forward ahead a little bit. So some of my background really stems from my upbringing, my childhood.
Sure. Right.
So I grew up in a pretty much middle-class working family.
Right.
My parents separated at a pretty young age.
Right.
And when they separated, we stayed living with my mom in a town in Halifax, northern Dauphin County. And my mom went back to work, and there's a whole other story about, my mom, her fiscal responsibility, and I think how that ended up shaping a lot of me and my upbringing. But in growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of resources. We had what we needed by far. And, looking back on it now, I always wanted more.
Right.
Kids especially, we always want more.
Very true.
Most around me had more. But we always had everything we needed.
Sure.
And that was, first of all, the first blessing and the first realization of what's really, I think, important in life.
Yes.
It can be easy to lose sight of that at times.
Very
but because we didn't have a whole lot, I never had a whole lot myself personally. And when I was going into high school, I had a gentleman who became sort of a mentor in my life at the time. He was a teacher who did painting work on the side to make a little more money during the summer months and over the weekends. And he offered me a job to start working with him.
Right.
And I started doing that so every summer from my 8th grade into 9th grade year and then through college. That's what I did.
Okay.
I worked 50 plus hours a week.
Yep.
I worked harder. I got up earlier for work than I did for school. So school was really a reprieve in some regards. It's like, hey, I get to sleep in an extra hour.
Right.
But it was just me and him, and every once in a while we'd bring in another individual or two.
Okay.
And the cooler part about that experience was I got to see, even at that small scale, but I got to see so many different aspects of running a business.
Sure.
In that sense, we had lead generation and trying to find clients, interacting with clients, bidding and pricing jobs appropriately, dealing with customer disputes, supplies, costs, all that stuff
Right.
that goes into bidding, supplier relations, knowing where you're going to source your painting products, and if you need specialty equipment for a certain job, and doing all that kind of stuff. Where I was able to get through him really a front row seat and a kind of real hands-on experience around, even at that small scale, running a business.
Sure.
And I made good money too. I was by the time I got to my senior year, I was making $15 an hour working.
Nice.
And that was 20 years ago
So
almost. I was making good money as a kid.
Right.
And some of that was seeing how my peers were working at, and nothing against any of these places, but they were maybe working at Giant or McDonald's or whatever, and they're getting, maybe they're a lifeguard at the local pool.
Sure.
They're getting 10 or 15 hours a week of work at minimum wage, bringing home next to nothing. Meanwhile, entrepreneurship and small business ownership was presenting and affording me an opportunity to do something more and to have more. And that really kind of kickstarted my aha of, oh man, okay, there's more that's out there. And so that was really the kind of, I'd say the original.
Sure.
I went to Messiah College, graduated from Messiah in 2007. And while I was there, I discovered that I wanted to get into finance of some sort.
Okay.
I was a business major with a finance concentration. I knew I wanted to get into finance of some sort, but I really didn't know where. So I sought out some sales jobs.
Okay.
In different industries. Some, it was door-to-door stuff. It was, so I was open to anything sales related.
Right.
I ended up landing a job with a Medicare sales group, which there's a separate irony there because I have a small Medicare practice now. But the first week, I distinctly remember I was studying for my life and health exams. I passed my exam, and I remember being in my car after I passed the exam, driving away, thinking, I'll never have to paint another house again. And I was like, this is awesome. This is my new. Then I started working in that industry, and my first week I drove 1,200 miles, made 0 sales, and realized, I don't think this is going to be it.
Painting wasn't looking so bad at that point.
Yes. So needless to say, there was a little more painting in my future, which was fine. But that failure, so to speak, really what pushed me to say, you know what, this is the industry in the financial advisory, wealth management industry is really what I want to get into.
Gotcha.
I'm just going to get into it now. Why don't I'm going to just jump in now. So I started interviewing different places and was fortunate to land a job at just an unbelievable opportunistic time of February of 2008. And everything was going so well in 2008 and 2009. It was just a great time to be in that industry. But
record breaking.
Record breaking, yeah. But I'm a bit of a contrarian thinker, and as I was interviewing and realized, if I'm going to do this, what a great time to do it, because if I can learn how to kind of fight through and survive in this type of a climate, hopefully we'll have a pretty long career at it. And, almost 16 years later, actually next month will be 16 years later.
That's awesome.
We're still here. And we could talk maybe about some of the other, because there's a big gap between 2008 and now that's leading here. But that's really, a lot of it was at the heart of that. It really started with wanting more, and it morphed into seeing really the benefits of what entrepreneurship and business ownership can really do for not just me. So my mentor, the first person I worked for at the time, he was bettering himself. He was making decent money as well. But what he was able to do for me through that was just as life-changing. And so as business owners, we talk to a lot of people where they say, well, it's not just about me, it's about the team and the people around me and them being able to provide for their family and friends, and it's a cascading thing, and being able to participate in that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I know even in my role, I've been doing this now for 12 years, and so being a part of the community is always something that I felt was important, because you're able to change people's lives, right? What we do at the Chamber, what you're doing for your clients, it's life-changing. It really is. Can you talk a little bit about, again, you talked about your team. How do you, as that entrepreneur, right? You were brought into a situation with the painter where you were part of a team. How do you sort of make those choices when you're saying, hey, how do we figure out what our team looks like? How do we develop and make that team move forward, right? Because we've all heard stories about how you have good team members and not so good team members, and sometimes you need to jettison team members to bring a new team member on. What process do you go through, right, on that entrepreneurial side where you go, hey, this is who I'm looking for to build my team as I move forward?
Some of that's still a work in progress.
Sure.
And given some of the stuff that happened last year and our business really kind of pivoting, refocusing, resetting, it's going to look a little bit different going forward than it had.
Sure.
But I think at the root of a lot of that, you really have to have a solid understanding of who you are as an organization,
right,
what's really important in your organization,
sure,
and being very clear about the really cultural fit of an individual. And there are tangible things that are, I think, part of that, but then there's a lot of soft and non-tangibles that are just a person's character and their values and things like that really ultimately I think should be at the heart of that. Now there's a separate layer of that discussion that goes into creating structure and a framework to help make those decisions well.
Right.
And that's one of the things that we're rebuilding to be able to do that, not for me in a vacuum, because I'm a flawed individual. I know it's hard to believe, George. I'm sorry for revealing that.
That's
I know,
the first I've heard that about you.
Yeah, well,
so
it's public now, so
okay.
I can't really backtrack unless we can edit that out. I don't think any of us are really called to make decisions in isolation.
Sure.
So one of the other ways that I've personally done that is I've always had been fortunate to have different mentors or people in my life who I could go to with whether it was an intentional engagement or just a casual when needed.
Sure.
A couple people that come to mind, and I'll give them shout outs because they've been on the podcast before, but this gentleman hasn't, but one of my youth leaders growing up in the church I grew up in, Brian Headings, was a huge influence in my life. Dale Fallon was one of the first business and communication coaches that I started working with. Poor guy had a lot to mold and a lot to work with, and has got some incriminating evidence from the past that's hanging out there that might be fun to resurrect. And then some other individuals that have been just good sounding boards. And now fast forward, being able to be I'm fortunate to be able to be a member of a local Vistage group.
Sure.
Where, I tell you, the value of organizations like that, where you can gather with other peers who are maybe they're not in your industry typically.
Right. Sure.
But they understand what you're going through. And business, we overcomplicate business in a lot of ways. We all do the same core things in terms of what needs to happen with the business. You've got sales, marketing, operations, finance, HR. I mean, it's going to look differently if you're in construction or door-to-door sales or finance.
Very true.
In terms of what that, the actual application. But at its core, those are things we're all responsible for.
Correct.
So having people in a room who are primarily responsible for that and just getting feedback has been invaluable as well. So I think there's value in having outside counsel, and then there's value in having, I think, a strong team internally with a good process to be able to help make positive decisions. We happen to be fans of EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. We had Matt Foss on the show before talking about that, and there's different programs that are out there, but the framework of that really builds out in, I think, accomplishing some of the stuff you're talking about is pretty powerful.
That's awesome. So obviously we're on a podcast now. This podcast that we're on now is a little different than what you and I were doing. Similar type focus, right? We're talking about business owners, entrepreneurship. How did you sort of change from what we were doing with the old podcast to where we're at now with Born? Obviously, Born came from your brain, right? This was something that you thought up, that Business Owners Resource Network, right?
Yeah.
How does that sort of fit together, making that change from what was I'll call it a corporate thing,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
To now doing your own thing.
Yeah. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a strong shout out to Ted Jenkins and Lee Heisman, who started the Shrimp Tank podcast.
Correct.
Who
Yep.
was where we got our start. And I tell you, I mean, they run a phenomenal machine.
Yep.
It is.
Yep.
It's a well-run. Ted is incredible. He's in our industry, and we wouldn't be where we are today
Sure.
without
Right,
that.
right.
They provided great support to get us up and running. And candidly, I didn't really know I wanted to do this until I started doing it, and
Yeah.
felt like, oh man, this is it's a lot of fun. I think
Sure.
I'm pretty good at it, but we get a
We can talk about that later, but, but that's fine. Go on.
thank you. But really, it ultimately just it came down to control,
Sure.
and really being able to truly carve out exactly what we wanted to do.
Yes,
And you know,
right.
they're building a great brand. We have no hard feelings. We had a great, it was just came to a point where it said it's maybe time to move on.
Right.
And really, we wanted to be able to start really refocusing our brand around how do we really build up and empower our community here in central Pennsylvania.
Sure.
And we saw some of the fruits of that. You and I did. I think you were part of some of those during COVID when, first we saw all the shutdowns, and we did our mini series on in the crosshairs of Corona, where we were able to have people come on and share their stories of what it really was like from their perspective. So we heard a lot about from the government or maybe from the employee perspective, but we heard from the owner's perspective on what that was like.
Yeah.
And sometimes we forget that owners can sometimes be put on this like pedestal of, oh, well, they're the owner, they should feel it. They shoulder the responsibility of the business, but we also shoulder the responsibility of everybody that's underneath us.
Right.
And, Tracy, who you talked to, the Brian and Patty, the Sibboks, and you hear these people who are really like grieving for their people because their lives are getting upended.
Right.
And then being able to do our campaign where we're trying to raise some money and some support for some of those organizations, really making this move, I think, just gave us a lot more control and flexibility to really be able to promote and do that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Both from a I'd say ownership perspective, but also a financial resource perspective, and really just working to continue to build out that influence in that brand is what's really important for us.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I know one of the things that you talk about a lot on this podcast is, right, the transition that people go through, right? They go from one to another to something else. And obviously, you've made several transitions in your life, right? From painting to the work world to driving around aimlessly in a car, not getting anything for it, to now being in this position.
Yeah.
How do you try and communicate some of those changes to your staff and others as they're looking to evolve, move, change in their own life? How do you, I'll call you seasoned, because you've been doing this for a couple of years, right? It's nothing to sneeze at.
Feels weird saying that. I don't feel like I'm at that stage yet, but I guess
I don't feel like I have that much wisdom. But how do you help communicate that to your team and to others in the community as they're thinking about, hey, Nathan, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think, right? As a new mentor, or more of a mentor now than looking for advice, how do you give advice?
That's a really good question. It's kind of a loaded question. I think a lot of it really starts from a framework of trust and transparency.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because I think too many times people only want to hear about the glamour and the positive things. And, really, stuff might happen, but but we need to also be aware of the realities of what somebody might be getting into.
Right.
And being willing to share. I think there's an element of, and that's on maybe the transparency side. There's certain things possibly from a legal standpoint or a confidentiality standpoint that you might not be able to share, but just being willing to be open and say, well, look, here is what I learned, and here's the mistake. Doesn't mean that doesn't mean that you shouldn't make the same decision, but you might make it a little, or do it slightly differently because of what I learned. But in terms of the team side of things, I'll stay going back to, I think, trust and transparency. And I have been, I've been the benefactor of, for whatever reason, and I think I've tried to be intentional about this over the years, but for whatever reason, I have gained the trust of a lot of people within our organization, where as you do that, and as you say your words, there's simple. Actually, it was just part of my scripture reading this morning. But let your yes be yes and your no be no.
Right.
And I think as you do that more, you don't have to convince people as much about something if you've been true to your word and you've been genuine about it, and as long as people, I think, understand what the risks are of what they're getting engaging in, what the possible benefits are, and I think lastly that if you're a part of it and a part of it with them, that you have their back.
Sure.
That as a kind of metric of communication, I think is really what helps bring people along when there is change that's coming.
Right.
Because as creatures, I think naturally we don't like change in general.
I would agree with that. Yep.
I'm a believer that change is a good thing from the standpoint of, as long as you're progressing and evolving and moving forward, change is a good thing. Change for the sake of change tends to provide, I think, more disruption than it does benefit.
Right. Yeah.
But that's really what I've tried to do, and approaching it from, I said I've been a benefactor of, I think if you have the mentality that grace given can be grace received. I've been given a lot of grace. I don't think I've done this perfectly by any means, and I've been fortunate that the people around me have shown me grace when I maybe haven't done it as well. And I think that gets to the deep down, they understand, I think, where my heart is at.
Sure.
And I might not do it perfectly, but I'll be open to hearing when I do it incorrectly, and I'll do what I can to right that ship.
Right. Well, I think the acknowledgement, too, of that makes a huge difference, because there are people running organizations who don't acknowledge that they do fail, or that they do have problems, or that they may need to change something. And that goes back to what you originally said about culture, right? When you create that culture of, I'm in charge and you're not, that's a whole different world than what some people are working in, or some people are stuck in that and they can't get out.
Yeah.
Right? So I think being able to be honest and true, not only with yourself, but with your staff, with your clients, whoever, you're right, it does create something that's very different. That again goes back to the organization, right? Think about those organizations that you want to partner with, you want to do business with, you want to be a part of. Typically, they have similar type cultures. Again, may not be same industry, may not even be close, but the operations, the way they do things, is coming at it from the same lens. Which is uniquely different, especially in this world we live in, is being able to stand out, but do what you do so well. Right? And I think part of that brand of what you have been able to establish, not only here with the business, but with the podcast, is that this is legit, this is what you're going to get. You listen to any podcast, you watch any of the guests that are on, it's all about them, right? It's tell us about you, right? And I think that's something that's uniquely different versus, well, today we're going to talk about me.
This is my podcast.
Right, and if you want to fill in anywhere, come on in. Again, it's uniquely different.
Well, we're big here at our office. We are big and becoming bigger as the day goes on. Patrick Lencioni fans, where he has a group called The Table Group. He's written a number of best-selling books and business fable books. He has a hiring and team-building structure called Working Genius. But one of the things that he is very passionate about is vulnerability within the organization. And that's something I think that you touched on early on in your previous comment. Some of the most powerful words that I think any leader can say is, I was wrong, I'm sorry, will you forgive me for this mistake? But just admitting that you were wrong is one of the I think, largest acts of vulnerability that any of us can do, because none of us like being wrong. I don't like having to do it.
Right.
But the vulnerability, and then I think what that does and opens up for a team is incredible.
So let's talk a little bit about really your community involvement, right? Obviously, we as a chamber, huge part of being a part of the community. What have you done to, as an organization, be able to give back and be part of your community? Because, as you know, it makes an impact. I know that you obviously want to make that impact. So give us a little idea of what you're doing to help make that impact locally.
That's also another really good question, and I would say is loaded, because there's the old us and the new us.
Sure.
The old us had some community involvement from a corporate standpoint.
Sure.
But not really a whole lot.
Okay.
It wasn't something that was actively promoted or encouraged.
Yep.
Even though, if we look at our group now today, pretty much everybody that's in our organization is volunteering or using their time or resources in one way or another, independently of here.
Right.
What we hadn't done a good job of was codifying that and saying, well, look, we need to be doing that stuff together as an organization.
Yep.
Yesterday, we just had a brainstorming session with our entire team about what organizations are we all partnering with in some way. Either it's time, or we came up with 20 different organizations that pockets of us are currently either on boards of, or just volunteer for, financially support, or whatever it might be. And one of the rhythms that we're putting in place is to actively promote our time during a working week, work day, to go out as a group to serve together.
Right.
Also promoting for individuals for causes that they care about. Because sometimes, if we have 10 plus people that are trying to volunteer somewhere, there might not be as many of those opportunities to do stuff in a group together where you're really building. So there's select ones of those, but then encouraging individuals to do that. I shared this yesterday with our team. I've been a little hesitant in the past about promoting that.
Sure.
From the similar standpoint, and maybe what you were saying about the podcast, this is about the show. It's about the guest.
Yep.
It's about what they're doing in the community, and even with Abby and I try to sacrificially give financially to organizations, but I don't really want recognition for it.
Sure.
I don't want people to I feel much more comfortable being the behind the scenes donor, and in that regard, even in volunteering time, I feel more comfortable with that too, because it's really more about the organization and the benefit that the organization would be receiving. Now, the element of there is community involvement that people that are engaging with your organization want to know that you're a part of the community, actually genuinely doing that kind of stuff. There's a way to do that well.
Absolutely.
But really what our emphasis is right now is to encourage time during the week where you don't have to take time off.
Right.
It's we look at it as part of your job. You have we want you to do this. We have this much time to do this. We encourage you to do that, and really just promoting getting out there and serving that way. It can be easy. It's easy in one way to write a check. Much more difficult to give your time and that energy and resource. And so getting in a good rhythm of doing that is something we're going to be seeing. So that's going to be something that's different this year going forward. We're going to be, I don't say promoting that outwardly more, but encouraging that more.
Well, but I think it goes back to, again, you're creating a culture, you're creating an environment in which employees feel comfortable doing that. And if they come to you and say, hey, I'd like to go do this on Thursday, is that okay? Yeah. We're going to support that, versus the person who goes, I'd like to do this on Thursday. Well, as long as you have PTO time, then
submit your time.
Go ahead and make sure you get your work done beforehand, and don't take an hour more. Right. I think that's just a different perspective, right, on how you're running an organization versus how someone else may run their organization, and think about, okay, you're right. It doesn't have to be a letter to the editor. It doesn't have to be promotional with pictures and everything else. Just go do it, and if someone asks, hopefully they're going to see people in branded gear or not being out and being in that community. That's impactful.
Yeah.
Right. It's a very different environment than you will work until I say you're done, and then you can go home, and then what you want to do on your own time, that's fine.
One thing we're trying in terms of making that from a broader impact is we've started in our newsletters that we send out on a quarterly basis to include stories and examples of our internal team members and the work that they do in the community. If we hear of really cool initiative that a client or a partner of ours that's working with their permission, we're putting that in as well.
Okay.
Which is partly about maybe giving some credence to the individual and what they're doing, a pat on the back, but also highlighting those organizations and really promoting that culture of encouraging that kind of behavior. There's so many needs around us.
Very true.
And it can be easy to try, and I say that humbly realizing that I can fall prey to not being aware of it as well. But there are so many needs around us in our backyard.
Sure.
If we just open our eyes, or we're willing to open our eyes, there's a lot that's out there, and there's a lot we can do.
Very true. She's smiling at me.
Yeah, good.
She does always smile.
She
That's
does,
great.
yeah.
So as we think about moving forward, right, you're going to be transitioning into the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years strategically. What's one of your hopes for the organization as you continue to build and move forward, right? You talk a lot about with your guests, how did you get to this point, right?
Yeah.
So future looking, right, future Nathan, looking down the road, what do you see as something you go, this is sort of a mark we're looking to try and hit, again, whether that's 2, 3, 5, whatever years down the road?
So are we talking about the Questmont?
Yeah.
Is that the
from the business side.
Well, everybody, when we put these projections out, and part of this EOS process is putting a 10-year vision out there, which is really the BHAG, if you know that, the big, hairy, audacious goal.
Right.
And if we would put that out there, we haven't agreed to this as a team yet, so this is not a group consensus, but this is a general idea.
Right.
I think though a couple of things I would like to see is I think our business has really the ability to be a niche provider in certain areas within our kind of sphere.
Right.
Within retirement plans, we do, I think, a lot of good work for what really is a core group of people in central Pennsylvania that is, just doing good tax planning, retirement planning, estate planning for families that are nearing or in retirement.
Right.
Exit planning work for businesses, particularly that small to medium-sized business where kind of end up being out on an island, might not be big enough for a real maybe investment bank or even certain maybe brokerage groups to dig in and get them an offer, but you don't even know where to start on getting from where they or think they want to go to actually getting there. Andy Otto has a strong background in his trust and fiduciary side of things. And so I think as we see the business grow and mold, instead of having just one group that just kind of grows, it's going to be part of one organization, but we're really going to have dedicated specialist groups that will be able to build out to serve those lines.
Okay.
Is one thing. And that's kind of maybe more practical.
Yeah.
But from a philosophical standpoint, I think we really want to be intentional about culturally the type of people that we bring into the organization who are first and foremost loving and kind people. Exhibit strong sense of humility, want to take ownership in the work that they do. We're not a micromanaging group. We'll provide resources and tools to help you get from where you want to, from point A to point B. But people really thrive here when they have that sense of ownership and pride, not in a negative sense, in getting something done. But also maybe pivoting the way our industry has traditionally brought people into the business, which is more of a cut your teeth, eat what you kill, we'll give you maybe a little bit of a runway, versus really helping to bring in, mentor, develop, and build
Right.
Individuals to have a lasting impact in this industry. So I
Okay.
think some of those things, those are things that we'd want to see. And eventually, I'd love to see an organizational structure where, we don't know what the future holds for
Right.
any of our
Yeah.
businesses. I'd love to have an organizational structure in place where, if it was clear as day that it's time for Nathan to move on to something else,
Sure.
that could happen, and the work that we're doing would not be negatively impacted by
Gotcha.
that. So that takes time in building a team,
Sure,
building a
absolutely.
structure around that. But for me, those are some things I think we'd be doing.
Excellent. Very good. So as we start to wrap up and think about the podcast, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, we're talking with business owners. We're talking about those who providing resources. What would be your sort of last throw out there to those entrepreneurs, those individuals who are watching the podcast and going, "Hey, I'm thinking about X." What's your sort of one nugget of advice that you throw out there with the experience that you've had to say, this is Nathan's nugget, right? This is your one thing to keep in mind when sort of thinking through that entrepreneurial spirit, process, whatever it may be.
So I'm giggling because I thought of maybe a separate segment called Nathan's Nuggets, but I don't know if that's...
I don't know. I don't know if McDonald's would say anything incorrect about that.
Well, we'll see.
We'll see.
One thing, it's hard. Sometimes hard to boil that down, but I think probably the first thing that would come to mind is, if you've got that urge, that itch, that something that's in there, just do it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're a lot of times we're afraid to fail.
Sure.
What we forget is that even the most successful, if you look at some of the most successful entrepreneurs from a worldly standpoint,
Sure.
you look at Bezos and Apple and Elon Musk. You know how many times those guys failed? Either went bankrupt,
Right.
lost businesses. Like there's failures.
Right.
The amount of failures they had.
Yeah.
I think back to I'm a big Friends junkie. So
Sure.
when Monica's dating the gentleman who runs the tech company, and he created this software operating system, and
Right.
it's the something 500 and whatever.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, the first 515 failed, but
Right.
516 was a winner. That kind of stuff happens more often. Maybe not
Sure.
that many.
Right.
But it's okay to fail.
Right.
And just knowing, I think, when you go at it with that mindset, also having the understanding of what's my exit plan, like what's my fallback, what's my exit plan
Sure.
if this doesn't go well. I'm going to
Right.
give it my best shot, but in thinking that way, what you want to try to avoid is throwing too much on the table where
Right.
you put yourself in a position where you're never going to recover.
Sure.
I think there was somebody out there, I'm never going to financially recover from this.
Right.
That was, you don't want to do that.
Right.
You don't want to be
Right,
that guy.
Right.
But being willing to go for it, knowing where your real blind spots are, and not overly leveraging or risking yourself to the point where if it doesn't go well,
Sure.
you have no real way to recover. That'd be
Right.
my suggestion.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Nathan, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come in and do this, be a part of this. Thank you to Joy for allowing me to come back and be a part of this great thing that is the Born Podcast. I will encourage everyone that's out there, continue to listen, subscribe, watch. They're doing some really great things. It's neat for me to be able to sit at my desk and these podcasts come up and I'm like, all right, that's cool. I'm going to listen in and see. Because many of the people who are on these podcasts, they're literally right in our backyard, right? You're not interviewing guests from
Right.
California or somewhere else. They're in our backyard and they're making impact in our communities every single day. So thank you for what you're doing. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to come in. So Nathan, give us a little bit of information. If people are interested in Questmont and learning more about your organization, your team, what you do, where can they grab that information? What's the easiest way for them to reach out and contact you or a team member?
Probably the easiest starting point would be just go into our website directly, which
Sure.
is just www.questmont, which is QUESTMONT.com. The site's going to be a little bit of a work in progress. I mentioned
Yep.
a little bit earlier about there's different specializations. We're currently in the process of building that out to have more information around there, but there's still some good information and resources on there. Also, we have a Facebook page, LinkedIn page, where we'll put some content out every once in a while. But I think on our website, you can sign up for newsletters and things like that as well if you want to get more information and try to get maybe a little bit of a feel for who we are as an organization and what we're all about.
Oh, we certainly appreciate that. Again, if you're looking for information, go to their website, questmont.com, and grab some more information and contact someone. Reach out today. Thank you, Nathan.
Thanks.